Hello and good evening. Today I am addressing the students of second semester English honors, and I would like to give a small introductory lecture on Chaucer, Geoffrey Chaucer, and the unit which is assigned in the syllabus is Chaucer's prologue to the Wife of Bath. But before I go into Chaucer, who is Chaucer and what is the relevance of the name of Chaucer in the history of English literature, I would like to, since Chaucer is one of the earliest of the English poets, I would like to give a brief introduction of the history of English literature. Now, for the sake of convenience, the history of English literature is divided into different ages, starting with the Anglo-Saxon period, followed by the Anglo-Norman period, and then we come to the age of Chaucer. Then we have the Dark Ages, the Elizabethan age, which is also the age of Shakespeare. Then we have the Jacobean age. Likewise, we have the later ages also, like in the 18th century, the age of Pope, then 19th century, the era of Romanticism, and then the Victorian age, the modern, the postmodern, and so on and so forth. Now, when we go into the earliest part of the history of English literature, the first age is the Anglo-Saxon period. Now, what is the importance or significance of this period is that is the first period in which we have written literature. That was the time when written literature started. Before that, there were oral traditions, there was oral poetry. But the first written accounts come to us from this period, which is the Anglo-Saxon period. But surprisingly, the Anglo-Saxon period, though it is a period in the history of English literature, yet the language of that period is something which we cannot understand. We cannot even decipher that language because it was written in a different script, and this is the period when English had not developed. It is the early English period or Old English, which is also called Old English. So it has somehow no similarity with either Middle English or Modern English. The very word Anglo-Saxon comes from two tribes, the Angles, the Saxons, and there was the third tribe, which is the Jutes. The Angles, the Saxons, and the Jutes. These were the people of England, and so that period is called the Anglo-Saxon period. The second period is the Anglo-Norman period. Now, the word Norman has come from uh, Normandy, which is a place in France. And this is called the Anglo-Norman period because in 1066 AD, William of Normandy had invaded England and in the Battle of Hastings, and that was the first time the French conquered parts of England, and therefore this period is also called, this is the starting point of the French influence in the history of English literature. Uh, just as we have the French influence, we have so many other influences, like we have the Scandinavian influence in language, not only in grammar and spelling, but also in structures, word formations, vocabulary, then pronunciation, and all aspects of grammar. So the Scandinavian influences when the people from Scandinavia, if you look at the world map, you'll find Scandinavia is comprises of the countries of Finland, uh, Sweden, and the northern part of the Scandinavian peninsula. So they were also called the Vikings, and they had come to England a number of times. And when they came, they had left the traces of their language here and there. And so we have the Scandinavian influence. We have the Roman influence when Julius Caesar invaded Rome. So, likewise, we have the what is the modern English language today uh, is a combination of so many different foreign elements. Though now it's not foreign anymore, they are all encompassed, and this is what makes modern English today. So, language is never static; it grows, it changes, it mutates, and new words are go on adding in the dictionary, and some earlier words are gone. They are called archaisms. So so we see how all these things are happening. That is in history of language. But when we come to the age of Chaucer, that is the age in where it is called the age of Chaucer because Geoffrey Chaucer was the greatest poet of that time, and he is also called the father of English poetry, or even the father of English literature. And why is it so? It is he lived he was born in the middle of the 14th century, sometime in the 1340s, and he is a great name in English literature because of not only about because of the voluminous works which he had written, but also because it was he who first standardized English. Middle English period starts with Chaucer. So in those times, Middle English, when we say Middle English, uh, then it had different dialects at that time. There were three prominent dialects existent at that time, and Chaucer used the East Midland dialect, which is also the dialect in London, and it is in this dialect which he wrote his English poems. He wrote a number of French, he wrote in French too, but his English works were written in the East Midland dialect. And this is the dialect which later was accepted as standard English. So we say that it was Chaucer who standardized English, and all later works, including Shakespeare and all, followed this standard English. Now, before that, the East Midland dialect, or the dialect of London, that was the dialect which was used by the common English people. It was the idiom of the commoners, and it was this language which was used by Chaucer. Unlike French or Latin,